Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk on Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. I am here with my good friend, Nikki Hardeman, otherwise known as the anchor on Holy Smokes. And Nikki, you are unmuted. You are unmuted. So you can speak and we can hear you.
Hello. Good to know. Yes, I'm the worst at it. I always forget to unmute myself. I was ready tonight.
so proud. We love growth when we see it. Hi, Ariana. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And my pronouns are he, him, his, and her pronouns are she, her, hers.
That's right.
And if you are watching, please let us know. Just put something in the comments so that we know who's with us tonight. And if you haven't already, please share this stream to your respective Facebook feeds so that people can see the disruptive faith-based content that we are putting out. Tonight, we are talking about the topic of what to do when you just don't know what to do, which is going to be about the uplifting topics of burnout and despair.
Sounds like fun.
Right? Happy Halloween. Yeah. So we are happy that you're here with us. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Nikki just to give us a little context and then get us started.
It's so good to see everybody tonight. I'm glad to be here on Real Talk. I actually threw out another topic idea to Grayson about a week and a half ago. And he said he needed somebody for this Thursday night, so we tried to make it happen. Well, logistically, we could not make that topic happen, so we're going to punt it until later. And so then we were stuck with, okay, what are we going to do now? So we were sitting there trying to figure out what topic we wanted to discuss. And I said, we should just talk about what you do when you have no idea what to do. Mm-hmm. And it kind of rang true. Yeah, it kind of hit. So we said, all right, let's work with it. So that's how we got to where we are. And we both shared with each other, and we're going to with you tonight, some of our own personal experiences. But we also thought one of the reasons that it kind of makes sense to talk about this is things are kind of hard. Yeah. And we know that we're in a really contentious time with lots of people talk about, all the division in our country, plus we have the pandemic and we have this election coming up. And everybody, I think, that I talk to, I know, is really feeling the weight. Everything just kind of feels heavy and hard, and just difficult. And so we talked a little bit about that and thought, sometimes it can leave you feeling really stuck. Yeah?
Yeah. I love it. That's it.
Yeah. So as we got going with it, I shared about how in the first time I really experienced something like this was in seminary. Actually, I had always been someone who went hard at everything that I did. And I'd always been able to do everything I tried to do. But there were a lot of things happening in seminary, grad school in general. Hey, Christian, good to see you. But yeah, there's a lot going on with grad school in general. It's a hard thing to engage no matter what your program is, really. And so there was that, plus a new marriage, and there were some things going on in my family, and I hit burnout about halfway through. I was exhausted. I was probably depressed. And I found myself unable to produce. So, which is kind of the point of grad school, right? Like you're constantly producing papers and projects. And
Nikki, the point is to have a closer walk with thee.
Oh, well, yeah. So I'm telling you, I'd gotten to the point where that wasn't happening. It was going further and further. But yeah, I was getting to where even cranking out papers was getting difficult. And I remember I sat down to write a sermon one night that I had to do, and I just couldn't. I literally could not make anything come. I couldn't even write crap down. And I began to explore that. I got in touch with a therapist and did some work, and finally realized I had just really run myself into the ground, and it's so hard that I could not create. That power was just taken away from me. So So yeah, and so that's kind of one of the first times I ever remember facing and hitting that kind of burnout that just stops you in your tracks, and there's nothing. It doesn't matter how hard you try or how much you will yourself, nothing was going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah. And what about you? Go ahead.
Was that your first year of grad school? Is that what you said?
No, it was about halfway through my second. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I got, the first year of seminary, I wouldn't say it was easy, but because I had a religion major in my undergraduate experience, I was prepared in a unique way to go ahead and engage that seminary. But then by the time I got to that second year, that combined with like family stuff. Yeah. I had a very sick niece, and I spent a lot of time with her in the hospital. And then just the weight of worry for her and worry for my sister and her family and all of that got to be so very much. So it was just difficult to do, to create, to do the stuff I was supposed to do and had to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Masters crushed my soul. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a very challenging process. I think in lots of different kinds of programs. In my case, my program was engaging big topics like ethics and theology and, just kind of big existential dread all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And yeah, master's, like higher ed in general, is difficult. So I don't downplay, but I think it's fair to say that not many programs have classes called Suffering and Evil.
You are right about that.
Like, not many programs are encouraging their students to face, without turning away, the abyss of human evil.
Right. It's funny what hits you in the middle of all of that. I remember sitting in theology class, and at this point in time, like my niece had been very sick, and it was kind of at that point where lots of people knew about it, and everybody was always asking for prayer and seeing how she was. And so then I'm sitting in theology class, and I get the assignment to write what happens in prayer. And so at that very moment, like I had to articulate my own understanding of what happens in the midst of prayer while struggling in my own prayer life to know how to even talk to God about and I remember like, that's when it hit for me, like everything kind of came crashing together. And I was just done. I was so done.
The oven dinged and said, done.
Yep. And I had to figure out how to move through that and past it and take care of myself in the middle of it.
Yeah, and we'll get to the hopeful end of this talk. So I experienced that most pronouncedly my first year of seminary. And I think it snuck up on me because, like you, I had a religion major in college and grew up on the college campus. Like, when people in Dr. DCW's Old Testament class were like flipping tables because she said that there were two creation stories and that it's a myth, and Adam and Eve may not have been, probably weren't historical figures. I was just like, yeah.
Right.
I knew that in seventh grade. So I was like, seminary, what? But then it wasn't the big questions about God, about theology, about the Bible that really sent me. It was more the triple threat of having Dr. Gushie's ethics class, Dr. Gushie's James Baldwin class, and Dr. Allen's Church History 2 class.
Who did you sign up for that? Who let you do that? Who let you do that? That was not wise.
It wasn't. I made it.
So much.
But so I think the combination of all three of those, it wasn't so much that I was doubting God or doubting the faith. It was more just like, is this Christianity thing I'm a part of redeemable? Because to see the witness of Christian history, which unfortunately and as an indictment is really European history. The two don't really diverge until like the 1950s, 60s. And so that combined with James Baldwin and reading basically a book a week of one of the most heavy and incisive. Michelle was the one that let me do it.
I was thinking, am I going to call her out? Because why did Michelle let you do that?
Realistically, it probably was her, like, Grayson, or you sure you want to do that? I'm like, of course.
Yeah, that probably is what happened.
So
she can't change y'all's mind very often.
Right. I'll blame me and let her off the hook. I'm sure she prayed fervently. But yeah, so then it was just that combination, and then dealing with my whiteness in ways that I didn't think I still needed, very naively. I remember telling former student Harrison Litzel on the first day of the James Baldwin class, we watched the movie I Am Not Your Negro. And I remember saying to him, I was like, oh, thank God I've dealt with my white guilt, or else I don't know what I would be thinking in this movie. I was so dumb. Like, I was so just like naive. And I see now that like it's not an end point, it's an ongoing process. Because at towards the end of that semester, I was I never reached the point of not being able to produce. I think part of my personality is that I'm able to hide feelings by producing. So that, fortunately, in terms of just my grades, was never something that I ran into. But the flip side of that is that I never really reached that place of burnout. Like, I never hit that rock bottom, so to speak, where I'm like, oh God, I really need to get some stuff together. I was just like, I'm functioning. And we talked about this in the climate change holy smokes last night. Christian, a double dose of this story. But that was around the same point that Christian and I was working with the Faith Community as the intern at that point. And, we'd have our weekly meetings, and I'd come storming in, and he's like, I hate everything I see because, that's gentrification and this is climate change, and Christian, you can't blah, 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 blah. And just like a constant Debbie Downer, which I have later found out was not so much depression, but OCD, and literally unable to stop thinking about these horrific things. And then it was around that time that the UN and other climate organizations published the report that basically gave us the 10-year timeline.
I remember that.
That sent me on a tailspin, and where anytime we talked about climate change, it was like, all right, well, my day is ruined. Because of the way that my OCD operated. And so I think I really got into that place of despair, where there were points, especially towards the end of the school year and then over the summer. And that summer was just really difficult for me, had roommate troubles, to say the least, and a new place, and felt very lonely. So there was a lot going on personally too. So politically, personally, academically. And there was just a point when I never reached suicidal ideations, never reached, hey, I have a plan to do this.
Right.
And my therapist retweeted that. He's like, if you were, I'd be worried and I'd be telling you. But I was, because the enormity of all of these things was so heavy on my mind all the time. It was the logical thing was I'm so terrified of this, and it's an existential threat. So the existential response is just not to be around to see it. It was I just wish I was alive to see this happen, to be, and would it not be better if I weren't even around, if my existence is predicated on the harm of laborers somewhere in another country, and if my whiteness is built off the backs of people of color, and if all of these things about me in particular are just built off of oppression and harm, then it was like, maybe it'd be better if I just wasn't around.
Yeah.
And it wasn't and now I'm going to do this, this, and this to make sure that happens. But it was just this like low point of just like, wow, my life is a net negative. And like the great sociological scheme of things.
Right.
I legit didn't even know it ran that deep. I probably should have been more open about it in retrospect. Sorry. Like, you can't be a pastor if I don't let you pastor. But all that to say, and I've been talking for a while, so I do want to wrap it up. But a friend who really isn't a friend of mine anymore, and that's a whole other thing. But this person did leave me a parting gift over that summer of saying that you should probably consider medication. And I was like, no, it's not that bad. Like, it's really, I'm functioning. And then I did, and started, was continuing seeing my therapist. And now I'm getting into the hopeful part, because I was just saying, I might as well not exist. So I think I need to say that I started taking Lexapro, and that has changed everything. And I'm, spiritually healthier. So even as the year has got, 2020 is a shit year, no doubt about it.
Right.
But me handling it means that it's a lot better than even 2018 or 2019 were. But yeah, so I have reached that point, and know what it feels like.
Yeah. So a couple of things in what you said. First, and I'm saying this and hearing from you that you have moved through this, but I could have just told you are way more than a net negative. You are absolutely net positive in this world, and I have experienced that. I love you. I do truly.
One thing that you want to say before you move on.
Oh yeah.
Spoiler alert for The Good Place. If you have you seen The Good Place?
Oh yes, absolutely. You gotta watch The Good Place.
Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, mute. But there's also that plot line in The Good Place when they're like, nobody has gone to The Good Place in 500 years because of capitalism. Right. That didn't help things.
I don't imagine, except they did get around to some helpful ways of looking at it at the end. But yes, absolutely.
Okay, back to you.
A little stressful. I remember that because I was watching it last year too. But but the other thing is that you kind of shared about this experience, and you put some things in place in order to move yourself to a better place of health. And so even as this year has gotten worse and worse and worse, because you've taken care of yourself, you've been able to withstand it. And I think there's a real word of hope in that, because and of course, everybody's experience is absolutely different. But when we hear people's stories, it shows us what can be. And so what I hear in that is, no matter how hard it is, there are things that can be done. It's going to be different for everybody, but there are things that can be done that can help move you to a place where you're better able to bear the challenging things that you find yourself facing. And absolutely. I think that's So I too, like you, not back in seminary actually, but actually more recently have gone the medication route. I did therapy for a long time, and it did what I needed, for a very long time. It gave me exactly what I needed. Talk therapy was perfect. It was a way that I moved through my own stuff and took care of myself. We've normalized it at my house. People know I have kids. And so my son went through some things. And so we took him to somebody, and I remember saying, it's time to go to the doctor. And he said, is that my body doctor or my feelings doctor? And I was so proud. I was like, yes, that's right. We do preventative medication, preventative work for this now. We don't have to wait. So absolutely. I think that can be a resource, and medication can be a resource when that doesn't go far enough. But there are also things that we can do on our own. And I'm curious, what are some things that you do that help you not move to that place of burnout, or that help you stay in a good and healthy place?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always rep this, but Lexapro, seriously, I know, I am a huge pill advocate now. now. Because, like Glennon Doyle says, Jesus loves me, this I know, for he gave us Lexapro.
Right.
It hits me so hard. So that is one of them, making sure not to miss dosages and not to miss replacements. Because I actually did last week. I ran out of time and didn't have enough time to pick up my dosage, so I missed one. Yeah. And you can go about a day without any effects, but I was starting to feel just like a fog or like a heaviness, and I was like, oh God. Go get it. And so I went the next day and basically bust down the door of the Walgreens, and I was like, my drugs, please. But in addition to that, meditation is very helpful because of the way that OCD operates. And I think people who just live in their heads, in our spiritual formation class, it was called the monkey mind, where it's just constantly going. And so meditation for me is way more helpful than journaling or other practices that can run the risk of being performative. Meditation is just nothing. So I do that. Running, especially during the pandemic, has become crucial. I ran in high school. I ran in college off and on. And then before the pandemic, I started working out for the first time. But then when I couldn't access gyms and was honestly starting to feel a little unhappy with how my body was bulking, I was like, I'll just go back to running. And it's actually proven really, really restorative to be outside and to just have that opportunity to really process through these feelings. And then the third thing I'll say is I think just having those affirmations of just breathing and knowing, even just knowing that I've done work for myself and done things for myself helps me do more things for myself.
No, that makes sense.
I've been through this and I've done this. You need to keep going. You can keep going. And then it's just a cumulative process. What about you?
Absolutely. And I'm going to tag on to that. So if I ever find myself getting sluggish or tired or not feeling well, the first thing I do is take a hot bath.
Yes.
And I scrub and I shave and I do all the things to take care of my body. Right. And then I put good lotion on. Yes. And I have learned that if I do that it starts kind of a cycle. If I feel kind of stuck, there's this thing I can do that I have learned because I've been learning myself for a while, right? This thing typically gets me moving in the right direction. And so for me, I think about things kind of weird. I think about it as working from the outside in. Right. So I first take care of my body, and that helps me to get kind of my mind and my spirit right. And it kind of helps begin to get that process of clearing out the cobwebs. And then I can get up and do the things I need to do. So that's something I do. Exercise for sure is always good. Get that dopamine flowing. That helps all of us. And then I think there's this other thing that I do. And I learned it. I came up with it. Carrie Newcomer is one of my most favorite artists in the world. I love her voice. I think I could listen to her sing the phone book and I would enjoy it. But she also happens to write really soulful folk music. And so she has this song called I Believe in it. And she talks about that she believes in a good, strong cup of ginger tea and tomato sandwiches and just all of these really tangible things that can be touched and felt and smelled and heard. And I found myself listening to that song over and over and over and over again because it just spoke to my soul so much. And then what I learned was I can kind of recite my own I believe, right? I believe in cuddles and snuggles with my kids. And then I go do cuddles and snuggles with my kids, right? I believe in sending a kind note. So I can go and do that, right? So there are these things that I know that even when existentially I feel scared or uncertain or kind of foggy where I can't see the future very well or kind of where I'm going, there are things that I know are good. And I latch on to those. And there are things that are consistent, family, friends, laughter. But then throughout time, like it used to be smelling my baby's heads when they were teeny tiny. And now it's ruffling their hair or tickling them to make them giggle, you know? And so there are things that absolutely, I live for it. I absolutely live for it. I mean, if I don't get at least 3 good ones of those a day, I feel like I have failed. But anyway, so yeah, those are some of the things that I do, that I latch on to, that help me.
I love that. I think one thing, and I don't really have a question, but I'm going to like make a comment, and then I just want to hear your like response to it or addition to it or whatever. When I was in the depth of my OCD spiral, the depth of this, would it not be better if I just didn't exist? If it's like sociologically true that my existence means this. There was a part of me, and I think progressive activisty culture inadvertently reinforces this, but it was like, if I stop thinking about this, let's just say climate change, if I stop thinking about climate change incessantly, then it just means I don't care anymore. So there was like this almost like self-righteousness to it, where it was like, no, I'm suffering because I care so much. And if I don't think about my privilege or what I could be doing better or what I'm not checking or naming or whatever, then I'm complicit. And so I just want to hear, like, have you experienced that? Do you resonate with that?
Oh gosh, yes. Yes, very much actually. Yes, I mean, there is this kind of, the more that you learn, the more you realize there's so much you didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really overwhelming, because the reasonable conclusion is it never ends. Because every time you turn over another leaf, you realize there are 500 more leaves to turn over underneath it. And it's this sense of there is no end to the terrible things humans can do to each other. Like, we are so incredibly creative at harm and torture and ugliness. We're so very creative. We produce a lot of that. Right? And we really produced so much of it that it is impossible for almost any of us to not be complicit in some way.
Right.
Like, every human being contributes. And so absolutely, yes. And I do think you're right. Like, that progressive-y culture does deal with this, that you're never allowed to rest. You're never allowed to be. You're never allowed, or you feel guilty if you do.
Yes.
Because you know all of the work that has to be done in order for people to be whole. I think there's some, I don't know if this is the right word. We would need probably professional help, but something related to survivor's guilt. I'm not sure. I don't think that's exactly what it is, but there's this kind of, I am safe and whole in my warm home with my full belly.
Right.
And my learning has told me all of the people who aren't. So
at the same time that, you know, you don't want to say it's so big I can't do anything.
Right.
And then you're in, especially in a seminary context, and I can't speak to other grad school contexts, but in a seminary context, like, you are being trained to address that world. And so you have to have some sense of, I have agency and power enough, more so than your average person, because we're being trained to do this, to do something about it. And so it's this balance of, I am one person, but so was Nelson Mandela. So was Elie Wiesel. So was insert here. And so it's just like, I mean, I'm not in that place anymore, but I'm getting echoes of that place. And I was just like, of course I was so like trapped.
Right. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people right now who feel that kind of, maybe not that specific frustration or concern, but there's so much happening right now, and there's so much being uncovered and revealed that has been happening for a long time. That there's a big overwhelm, I think, for people, and so it just feels like there's a lot to carry. So I hope we can all find. I hope we can all find ways to do those things that care for ourselves. Yes. Because when we do, then we can do those things that help us care for others. Mm-hmm. And that's how it has to be. It's so cheesy and it's so overused, but it's the whole air mask on the airplane thing, right? Like, you got to put yours on before you can help somebody else.
And that, Christian will kill me if I don't do this. And that goes to the greatest Commandment Theology.
It does. Absolutely.
Where, Jesus said as much, like it's not a love yourself if you feel like it, or love yourself so like only to the point that you can scrape by. It's like love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself, which means like love your neighbor at the same time that you are loving yourself. Love your neighbor in the same manner that you love yourself. Love your neighbor because your neighbor is yourself. Like I love that Jesus said as, because that word can have so many different meanings depending on how you inflect it. So I think the more that you think about it, the more it's like there are so many ways to love ourselves so that we may love our neighbors, as implied just by that 2-letter word. And I think, the tangible example that I point to, that when I wasn't loving myself as well as I deserve, and that others deserve, is that when I was on family vacations, that year, it would have been 2019, the summer of 2019. We went to Curie Beach in North Carolina. And I remember like literally the first thing I think when we get to the beach, which like is the picture moment, right? Like you run to the beach, fling wide your arms and just like let the breeze take you. And my first thought was, wow, so that's the ocean that's going to rise and drown us all in 10 years. No joke. And it wasn't something that I was like, I feel good thinking this. It's called an intrusive thought, right? So like it literally intruded because I had set these boundaries of like, this is vacation. I want to be happy. And then it was like, nah, bitch. And then it was like this process of, I don't want to be thinking this, but I'm thinking this. Can I please stop thinking this? But if I stop thinking this, does this mean I not care? And just like this constant, like back and forth. And of course, I was not fun to be around. Like my family wasn't exactly thrilled to be around somebody that was either actively trying not to be a downer. So there's this anxious energy, or actually being a downer in an attempt to like assuage the anxiety and release some of the pressure. And so finally being open with my family about that. And now I feel like I'm getting into a therapy session, so I'll back off from talking about myself. But finally it was when I was open with my family and let them know what more was going on. And then the other things that I mentioned, that was a process of loving me and loving them at the same time. Because I was able to then be around them and them around me, and them know me better and I know me better and I be known that by them better. And so it's that reciprocal process. It was one and the same as myself. Anyway, I've talked a lot.
No, well, no, and I love that you make that connection, because I do think that that's one of the ways that we take care of ourselves. It's like I said, I work from the outside in, but there is this kind of sense that working on loving myself, I did actively experience being able to care for people better. Right? I was more present to myself, so I was more present to others. I was more at home in myself, so I was more grounded when I was talking with others. There really is this way of where one feeds the other. And I think you can start at either place, right? Like, I think you can move in the direct, some people might be geared toward moving towards loving others, and that feeds into loving themselves, and some can love themselves, and that feeds. I think it really can kind of, you enter the circle wherever you are. Just know that that's what you're working toward, to keep it in balance. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
So we are about out of time. We've got about 6 minutes left. So I would love the last question to be, and I want to make sure you have the last word, that what would you tell your despairing former self? Like, what do you think younger Nikki or younger Grayson would most need to hear?
It's actually something that was said to my younger self by a friend. And I have used the advice with a number of people, because I remember I kind of had hit this place of burnout, and I was just feeling really overwhelmed. And I had to go I was a work study student, so I worked in the office, and I had to go tell my boss and say, I need some time off. And I just ended up, we have all cried in a seminary professor's office. And so I just broke down and shared with him what was going on in my life. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, Nikki, you can't make A's in everything. And he was saying, like, you might need to make an A in being a good family member right now. If you can make some B's at seminary, it'll be fine. And so, like, there was this, and when he said it, the timing was perfect. It was exactly what I needed to hear. And I was able, thank goodness, to receive it. And so actually, as that next semester was coming up, at that point in time, I don't know if they still do this, but I was able to contract in my syllabus for a B. Which meant that I just chose to do less work and earn a B. And I knew that from the beginning. And it was one of the best gifts I ever gave myself. Like, wow. I didn't have to work for an A, because I said at the beginning, I'm just going to make a B. And I set that expectation for myself. And so it helped me, stepping back from that class a little bit, helped me take care of myself in other ways. And to make A's in the places in my life at that point that were the most important to make A's. So yeah, that's what I would say. You just can't make A's in everything. And so when you're feeling burned out, whatever the reason is, take some time to step back, and it's okay to let something fall a little bit.
Oh, that's good.
So,
well,
yeah. Thank you so much. This was great.
This was so good.
Yeah, it worked out even when we had nothing to give. We thought. Right?
Yeah. This is what to do when you don't know what to do. Just start a live conversation and talk about the pits of your despair.
That's right. Fantastic.
Well, Nikki, do you have any other closing thoughts that you want to share?
No, I don't. This was enjoyable. Thank you, Grayson.
You're welcome.
Do you have anything?
Just the short answer to the question. I know I said I wanted to give you the last word.
No, go.
Okay. Just a short answer. When I was in the midst of it, I actually went to the Labyrinth on McAfee's campus and walked the thing. singing, I think It Is Well With My Soul, Be Thou My Vision, just like the good old hymns.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I reached the middle, I sat down and I just heard this voice. I mean, my tradition did not raise me to associate this with God speaking. Maybe it was. However God spoke, I think God spoke and just said, you are not responsible for this. This being the world. And we are responsive to it. But when I heard just those words, you are not responsible for this, I just broke down crying. And of course, it didn't fix everything. I still had a long summer of trial. But the fact that I still remember that as like a breakthrough moment of just like, oh, I'm not quite to that, that clearing yet, but I can see it off in the distance. And that's a gift as well. So I would tell my former self what God told me then. Like, you're not responsible for this. Don't survey all that God created. When God saw the world and maybe knew all that was going to happen and said, and it is good. And I look at it not knowing half of what God knows, a tenth of what God knows. And it is all bad. Like, who am I to make that judgment? And that's in a moment when it's just like, I'm nobody. Thank God.
Right? There's so much freedom in that.
Absolutely.
It really is. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Nikki?
I'm good. Okay. I hope you have a great night.
Well, we have to do a little bit of housekeeping.
Oh, yes.
Stick around. Well, I hope you have a good night too.
Oh,
you're welcome. But if you've enjoyed this, as I know Nikki and I both have, I feel nourished by this, as I often do when I talk with Nikki. I'm sure many of us can attest to that. Then you can stay connected with us by texting 31996 texting disruptive to 31996. And that will just allow you to sign up for our newsletter. It's not a commitment, but it is just saying, hey, I'd like to know a little bit more about what y'all do. So feel free to do that. And then, as always, we have many options for giving. If this is a blessing to you, then we ask that you invest in the ministry that's investing in you. And so we have a number of ways to give below. You can go to, yes. You can go to
I've always wanted to do
that. And search the Faith Community. You can go to www.thefaithcommunity.org/give. Or you can go to Cash App and search the hashtag tfcatl. Any and all contributions are appreciated. We're currently trying to invest in our streaming capabilities so that we can provide video quality that is as good as our content. And so if you feel so led to contribute to our ministry in that way, we would certainly be grateful. This Saturday, we have our October worship experience on Facebook Live or YouTube Live at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. We're going to be doing communion. So if you want to participate, feel free to bring whatever elements you'd like to join with us in that. Next week, we have Let's Talk About Sex, the second installment led by Minister Tierney Jordan. We all love Tierney and can't wait to see what she presents. We're going to be talking about purity culture. So from one despair to another.
Indeed.
Yeah. So we're talking about purity culture. Let's see. And it was just announced to me today that our next Faith in Film will be taking place November 1st, Sunday, November 1st. And we're going to be watching Rocket Man, the Elton John movie, which is exciting. So that will be, stay tuned for more details on that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us for Real Talk tonight. We have been Grayson, Hester, and
Nikki Hardeman.
Yes, and we have talked about what to do when you just don't know what to do, and we hope it's been helpful to you. So have a blessed night, everybody.
Blessings. Good night.